I won't be around this weekend due to a business trip, so please take care of Mom. Huh? You mean you'll be away from home this Saturday and Sunday too? Yeah. Is a problem? A problem? Taking care of your mother by myself on the weekend is a bit too much. Then why don't you work in my place? Earn the same salary as me, as if you can do that, then I'll do housework too. It's always like this. Every time something bothers him, my husband attacks me with remarks about not having an income since I'm a full-time housewife. What I'm about to discuss is about someone who only cares about himself and never cares about those around him. It's a story that occurred because of my foolish husband's actions. This story ended with a very refreshing twist, so I hope you'll listen to the end. I am Emily, a full-time housewife, and I'm 45 years old this year. Tom and I got married almost 20 years ago. In addition to us, Tom's mother also lives with us. But it was different when we first got married. We have been living with my mother-in-law for several years now. A few years ago, I received a message from Tom's sister, Catherine. Emily, I'm sorry to bring this up all of a sudden, but it seems like our mother has dementia. I couldn't hide my surprise at this sudden news. At the time, my mother-in-law was not even 70 years old yet. I was shocked to find out that she was suffering from dementia at such a young age. However, when I actually looked into it, I learned that dementia often develops in people in their late 50s to past their 60s, and that many younger people also struggle with cognitive impairment. From that time until now, my mother-in-law's symptoms have been relatively mild, but there were occasional moments when she would forget things or take time to understand and make decisions. Shortly after my mother-in-law was diagnosed with dementia, my father-in-law, who had been battling illness for over a decade, passed away. Until then, my mother-in-law had been living with my father-in-law, but she was now alone, and my sister-in-law, worried about her, suggested they live together. However, at the time, my sister-in-law was already married with 3 children and had a husband who was often transferred for work. So she was concerned about burdening her mother, and more importantly, her husband didn't seem very agreeable to living together. Therefore, it was decided that my husband, Tom, his eldest son, would live with us. And we began living as a 3-people family with my mother-in-law in Tom's childhood home. When I married Tom, I felt that there might be a possibility that we would eventually live together. That's why I was able to accept living with my mother-in-law so readily. My husband seemed slightly uneasy, but I have always loved my warm-hearted mother-in-law since the beginning of our marriage. She treated me really well every time we met and cherished me as if I were her own blood-related child. Since such an important person was in trouble, I thought positively about caregiving. However, caregiving, which was a first-time experience for me, was difficult. And there were many moments when I felt like breaking down. My mother-in-law's symptoms varied every day, sometimes being tough on my husband and me, and other days cherishing me just like before. Thanks to that, I managed to provide care up to this point. My mother-in-law has always been filled with a sense of justice, and even when we had a murder dispute, if my husband was the cause, she would scold him properly. My husband Tom also feared my mother-in-law sharp and correct judgment, and we were able to reconcile many times thanks to her. However, as we began to live with my mother-in-law, she slowly lost her energy. It was fine when her memory would stay vague, but when she clearly realized that her husband was no longer there, she became depressed almost every day. She didn't want to converse with anyone, even avoiding interacting, and the days she would shut herself in her room increased. Tom, seeing his mother like this, seemed hardly concerned, and his attitude became worse, almost as if he were taking out his anger on the mother who had once been strict with him. It felt kind of fitting that she developed dementia so easily, despite acting so high-end, mighty and saying all kinds of things before, huh? Even with my mother-in-law right there were times when he would say something too terrible. Moreover, when my mother-in-law was in good spirits, seeing her look down after hearing my husband's thoughtless word, he would continue to badmouth her, almost as if he had been waiting for it. Each time, I also stopped my husband. After a while, my husband was often away from home, citing business trips, and I was taking care of my mother-in-law alone almost every day. On the day when my husband came back from a business trip as usual, I was thoroughly disgusted with my husband, who left his clothes and socks and everything else lying around. He wouldn't take out the laundry no matter how many times I told him. So, as usual, I opened my husband's bag that had been left lying around to take out the laundry. And then, to my surprise, I found underwear inside the bag that I didn't know who it belonged to. But this is men's underwear, and judging by the size, it probably belonged to my husband. Every time his underwear or clothes wear out, he instructs me to buy new one. So he's not someone who is particularly fussy about his appearance. In other words, everything he wears is chosen and bought by me. However, I don't remember buying this underwear. I felt so uncomfortable that I made up my mind to check with my husband. Did you go buy the underwear that was in your bag? I've never seen it before. Upon my inquiry, my husband looked at me with startled eyes. I thought the ones I've been wearing were so old they were about to tear. I didn't know what to do, but it was urgent, so I bought some there. What? So old that they're about to tear? The underwear I prepared the other day is still brand new, isn't it? Huh? Is that so? No, didn't not just buy cheap one. My husband was stubborn and didn't tell the truth no matter what I asked. I noticed his evasive attitude right away, but didn't press him any further. There is no way he's having an affair, right? I thought about it for moments, but told myself it was impossible, given that we have our mother suffering from dementia. But right after that, the incident happened. 2 weeks later, my husband, who had been away from home on a business trip, came back. Even when I greeted him with, "Welcome home," he didn't respond much. Usually, he wouldn't exaggerate how tired he was from the trip, to the point where it felt annoying. But that day, he was unusually quiet, looking down. "Is something wrong? Are you feeling ill, perhaps?" Concerned, I was told, "Emily, do you have time now? I have something important to talk about." We went to the living room, as my mother-in-law was already asleep. I prepared tea and sat across from my husband. "What's the important matter?" When I asked, my dispirited husband began to talk. "I want to break up with you." My husband's request was so sudden, I couldn't say anything. Without regard for my shock, my husband continued to speak. "I know I surprised you, but it's not a joke. Please divorce me." "Why? I can't understand being told something like this all of a sudden." I was completely bewildered. We hadn't even had a marital fight that could lead to divorce. Of course, I had been taking care of both housework and caregiving with a cutting corner. And I always saw my husband off on his frequent business trips. Did I inadvertently do something that bothered him? As I was thinking these thoughts, an unbelievable statement came from my husband's mouth. "To be honest, I have someone I love. No, I've had a relationship with her for a long time." "What are you saying? Are you cheating on me?" As I asked in a trembling voice, my husband nodded his head. "So, the frequent times you were leaving home for business trips were lies? Deceiving me like that is the worst." "I can't blame you for saying that, but all I can think about is breaking up. I want to get a divorce as soon as possible." I felt suspicious about my husband suddenly saying he wanted to divorce so much, and I asked him this. "Why are you rushing to divorce so much?" After this, there were more shocking statements made by my husband. It's hard for me to say, but actually, she's pregnant. "What? A child?" Caught off guard by this unexpected revelation, I inadvertently raised my voice. I never thought it would come to this, but Her belly is starting to show a little. I have to do something, right? Indeed, there were no children between my husband and me. Even so, to impregnate his mistress else ever, that my husband could be such a terrible person. I didn't want to admit it. Emily, I'm sorry, but since I'm the father, I think I have to take responsibility properly. So, please, break up with me. At my husband's word, I quickly responded like this. I can't think of wanting to be with an unreasonable person who would have an affair. Let's break up right now. Even as he said, I'm really sorry, but thank you. My husband had a somewhat apologetic look on his face. You must tell your mom the truth, Tom. Saying this to me, my husband looked away. What? You don't mean to say that I should tell her, do you? Then my husband began to say something that could not be thought of as common sense. About my mother, could you continue to take care of her? What? What are you talking about? Do you realize how unreasonable you are being? I know. I'm making an unreasonable request. But it's absolutely impossible for me and her, who are going to have a child, to juggle both child rearing and caregiving, right? Unbelievable. How dare you say we should divorce? My husband had nothing to say. You're ready to leave and leave everything to me? I won't ever allow you to dump everything difficult on me. You're right. I'll think about it myself. My husband said that and went into his room. At the moment, I also felt drained and was so exhausted that I had no energy to think. So I took a bath and went to sleep. But when I woke up the next morning, I had a strange feeling. I hurried to the living room, and it seemed like there were fewer things around. When I went to my husband's room, the cause of the unease became clear. My husband was no longer in the house, and his belongings were neatly taken out. He left the house without saying anything to me. When I realized this fact, I was drained. On the only desk left in the room, I filled out divorce paper and the note saying, I'm sorry. Please take care of my mother, were placed. My husband had left not only the divorce paper, but also the matter of taking care of his mother, who needed caregiving. At that time, my anger surpassed my sadness. I won't take this lying down. I'll definitely get back at him. I made a vow in my heart and acted immediately. First, I needed to properly inform my mother-in-law about this matter. At first, it seems that she didn't quite understand. However, after taking to her carefully several times, she seems to get it, and I saw her expression gradually change. As I continued to talk, it was as if she returned to her old self, and we were able to converse properly. When I told her I was thinking of hiring a private investigator because I wanted to know the detail, she said, It's all my stupid son's fault, so let me pay all the costs. She took on all the expenses for the investigation. Upon investigating, my husband's whereabouts were quickly discovered. He was indeed at his lover's apartment, and evidence of my husband's infidelity was steadily accumulating. Tom didn't seem to care about his surroundings, acting openly with his mistress. Probably because he had left the divorce papers and no longer cared about me. I still had the unsubmitted divorce papers, but he knew nothing about them. Gathering evidence of Tom's infidelity was easier than I had imagined, so the investigation ended much earlier than planned. When I found out that Tom's mistress was junior college at his company, I asked my mother-in-law, "Could you give me a copy of this evidence photo?" And she sent a photo to Tom's company. A few days later, I was contacted by Tom for the first time in a while. "Is something wrong?" As I asked, my husband shouted at me over the phone. "Hey, what do you want to do? Sending evidence photos of the affair to the company. What's wrong with you as a person? I never thought you would be such a terrible person." And so on. He ranted on his own. I then told my husband what really happened. "What are you talking about? I didn't send any evidence of the affair to the company." "Hey, if you didn't send it, who did? Stop lying." I started to laugh, and my husband, who was making a fuss over the phone. But I held back and told him the truth. "Your mother sent it, you know." "What?" Leaving my bewildered husband, I hung up the phone. Several phone calls and messages came in, but I didn't respond to any of them. In the midst of this, my mother-in-law came over, calling someone on the phone and saying, "Come on, there is still more to do." About an hour later, the intercom rang, and it was my husband's mistress at the door. "Emily, could you please go to your room for a while?" I was told this, so I waited in my room until the mistress left. My mother-in-law came to my room and told me it was okay several minutes later. When I asked what she had talked about with the mistress, she explained in detail. She had told the mistress that she herself had dementia, and if she was going to marry her husband, she would have to care for her as well. Upon hearing this mistress seemed quite confused, as she hadn't known about my mother-in-law's illness. In the end, my mother-in-law explained how difficult caregiving could be. The mistress left the house. "Well, I'm looking forward to what happens next," my mother-in-law said with a laugh. She seemed to be enjoying this more than me, who was actually going through the divorce. The intercom rang again the next day. This time, I could see my husband standing outside the door. For now, I decided to talk to my husband inside the house. As soon as he entered the house and sat down, my husband opened his mouth. "Emily, can we get back together? I've decided to break up with her." with the woman I was having an affair with. I was surprised to hear him say this all of a sudden, but of course, I had no intention of doing so. What's going on? Why would you say that all of a sudden? When I asked, my husband told me about what had happened after his mistress returned home yesterday. Not only did his mistress say that taking care of my mother-in-law was impossible, but she also said that the child she was carrying was not my husband. It seems that the mistress, like my husband, had a relationship with several men, and my husband was not the father, but she had chosen him to marry because he was the most financially stable of the men she was involved with. However, once she found out that marriage to my husband came with caregiving responsibilities, she felt that she couldn't marry him, and she revealed the truth. I'm truly sorry. Let's start over, slowly if needed. I almost lost myself in anger as my husband said this as if it were a matter of course. Stop it! No matter how much I think about it, I have no feeling for you anymore. Just get out of my sight. My husband was surprised at my strong word. I will definitely claim alimony. I have solid evidence of the affair on my side. Saying this, I forcibly drove my husband out of the house. After a while, my sister-in-law came to the house after receiving a call from my mother-in-law. I'm truly sorry, Emily. I had no idea that things had become so difficult. It's okay, don't worry about it. I was able to take my revenge all thanks to my mother-in-law. I'm really sorry for all the trouble my foolish son has caused you. We've been thinking and discussing what to do from now on, and I've decided to stay with my daughter, Emily. Please live freely from now on. She hugged me and said this, tears streaming down her face. After some time, my mother-in-law moved into my sister-in-law's house and handed over the ownership of her house to me. I was also able to divorce my husband without any problems, and he complied with the payment of alimony. However, the news of his affair spread throughout the company, making his work environment uncomfortable. So, he voluntarily transferred to a regional subsidiary. Having lost his previous position, he is now working hard on a meager salary. On the other hand, I continue to stay in touch with my sister-in-law and mother-in-law after the divorce. I heard from my sister-in-law that although my mother-in-law's dementia is not completely cured, her condition has stabilized thanks to the anti-dementia medication. We sometimes arrange to have dinner together, and my mother-in-law remains the gentle and calm person she's always been. I myself have found work and am living a fulfilling life in the house my mother-in-law gave me. Just like how my mother-in-law reached out to me rather than her real son, my husband. I hope to become the kind of person who extends a hand to others in need, even if we are not related by blood.